West Hill United is a progressive spiritual community where how you live is more important than what you believe. West Hill United is a people, a place, an idea. We are a community living out of a progressive faith, striving to make a positive difference in our own lives, the lives of others, and the world. Join us Sundays at 10:30 a.m. or connect with us at any time.
I pledge my heart to clearer thinking, my heart to greater loyalty, my hands to larger service, and my health to better living for my club, my community, my country, and my world. This is a pledge for the 4-H clubs. I was a member of 4-H for about 7 years during my teenage years. It was something that I learned how to bake and cook and how to keep house. How to write a resume, and some people actually learned how to take care of a cow. I wasn't allowed to do that because we didn't live on a farm, but I wanted to. Earlier in my life, I was a brownie, a girl guide. As a mother, my daughter attended, and Babette, our lovely Babette, was her girl guide leader. My dog JJ and I used to visit Carrie, a friend to West Hill, as a therapy dog team. Jack, who is often seen on screen with his partner Kathleen, not sure if they're there today. Bottom right, there. You'll see Jack on the bottom right there with Kathleen in the picture, great picture, who also team up to visit people. But why do I tell you about these stories, these brief little snippets to my life, to others' lives? What do they have in common? Well, volunteering. None of those things that I lived through, that I did in my lifetime, could be possible without the incredible things that they do, that all the volunteers do. Today, we're going to celebrate volunteers and the work and their commitment to their heart, their head, their home, and their community. I'm going to use this to read off of rather than my phone. West Hill United is located in Treaty 20 in the area of the Williams Treaties of the 1923. These are the lands of the Mississauga of the Credit First Nation and were previously occupied by the Seneca and Huron-Wendat First Nations. I believe that most of us are unaware that the world's approximately 476 million Indigenous peoples make up approximately 6% of the global population, and yet play a vital role in the biodiversity conservation. They manage to hold tenure rights to approximately a quarter of the world's surface area, accounting for a significant portion of the world's biodiversity, nearly half of the Earth's protected areas, and over half of the planet's remaining intact forests that are crucial for sustaining life on Earth. As treaty people, we support the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which under Section 10 tells us that Indigenous peoples shall not forcibly be removed from their lands or territories. No relocation shall take place without the free, prior, and informed consent of the Indigenous peoples concerned. This declaration provides a roadmap to the advancement of lasting reconciliation with Indigenous peoples worldwide. At the end of readings, we customarily add the phrase, offered as wisdom for the journey, and we invite you to respond with the phrase, may we walk in its light. This is simply an invitation to participate if you wish to do so. Today's reading is written by our very own Martin Firth. The Heart of Giving. We often think of volunteering as something we do, an hour given, a task completed, a role fulfilled. But perhaps it's something deeper, a quiet recognition that none of us arrive here alone, and none of us continue alone. To volunteer is to step into that truth, to say, I will be a part of the web that holds others, not because we must, but because we can. Not because we have extra time, but because we have heart. And in that giving, something subtle happens. the distance between my life and our life begins to dissolve. Offered as wisdom for the journey. May we walk.
May we walk in its light.
The heart of giving, our topic today. When we talk about volunteering in Canada today, it's easy to focus on numbers and trends. In most organizations, as I'd mentioned, we often count volunteers by hours. But underneath the statistics is something far more enduring and far more hopeful. But of course, a few statistics. Nearly 3/4 of Canadians age 15 plus volunteered in some way in 2023. Some through formal roles, and of course, there are many informal volunteer hours and acts of care, checking in on a neighbor, supporting a friend, helping a family member through a difficult season. Altogether, it's quite remarkable. It amounts to over 1.2 billion hours each year. And if we were to actually pay for that, it would amount to over $40 billion in wages. And I think you'll agree, that's an extraordinary collective expression of generosity. And while the forms of volunteering may be shifting, the heart behind it remains remarkably strong. So not surprisingly, I found myself thinking about all the ways that giving shows up here at West Hill. So take a look at that. And so this is just kind of a categories of volunteering that happens here. And I probably have missed out on some things. But just to give you a bit of a feel for, the many tasks and individuals who are engaged here at West Hill. So what I'd like to do for a moment, for those of you in the hall and online, can we look at the online folks for a minute? And I probably have thrown a wrench in the works, but what's that? Oh, can we see the online folks? Ah, there we are. So now for all of us in the hall and in the room, stand up, please, if you volunteer. Here. Anywhere. There we go, as I suspected. And if you want to stand up online as well, we can look at your belly buttons. Just kidding, just kidding. But, and you could also stand up, yes, and we could stand up for many accounts, because not only the marvelous gift that all of you contribute in the hall and in the room, but if we have been to a hospital, we likely have been the recipient of volunteers who either sit at information desks or guide us from one place to another if you're dealing with tests, or who provide emotional support. So throughout our lives, I was a Boy Scout and there was a volunteer leader. And so we can all think about through our lifetimes that each and every one of us who has been touched by volunteers in ways big and small. And West Hill, I think when I look at the average of folks that volunteer, I know since I've come here is that it truly is breathtaking, the level of volunteerism here at West Hill. So it's not just the person who arrives early, the one who checks in, Sometimes it's the one who simply notices. And it strikes me that what we call volunteering is ordinary people, you and I and others, who put caring into action. Which led me to wonder, what is it really that makes those small acts so meaningful? That is something extra. Is it something extra? Something we do when we have time. Something we offer once the rest of life is taken care of. But that's not true. Oh, West Hill, thanks. That's the cake, by the way, that we're all going to be slicing into. Sorry for you folks online, but at least we wanted you to see the goods before they're consumed. So, but a big thank you as we mark Volunteer Sunday. So, because when we look closely at this community, at our own lives, we notice something deeper. That giving actually isn't an addition to life. It's part of our lives. It's our rhythm. It's our meaning. And perhaps that's what we're really exploring today. Not just what we give, but what giving does within us. So I'd like to draw on the work of Emily Estefany Smith, who's written a book titled, I'm going to a loose paraphrase, the Power of Meaning in a World Obsessed with Happiness. And so I'm going to borrow from some work that she does and that helps shape the pillars that help shape meaningful life. And we can create a meaningful life, and I believe at the heart of volunteerism, some or all of these pillars are present. Belonging, purpose, transcendence, and storytelling. And in reflecting on this week, these don't simply describe a meaningful life. They describe what happens when we choose to give. So let me walk you through these 4 pillars and making sure that we have time for cake. The first pillar, belonging. And belonging really comes from being in relationship, but importantly in relationships where you feel valued for intrinsically who you are and where you value others. Not for what you do, not for what they can do for you, but simply because you are. And at its heart, volunteering isn't about tasks, it's about relationship. It's about saying with or without words, you matter, you're not alone. For belonging isn't created through grand gestures. It's built in small, repeated moments. Those that we know well here at West Hill. A greeting at the door, a cup of coffee shared, a chair set up before others arrive, a name remembered. And what's striking about this is when we offer belonging, we often find ourselves belonging more deeply as well. There's something reciprocal about it. We step forward and hold space for others, and in doing so, we discover that we too are held. And in the crazy world that we seem to be living in, this kind of intentional presence is no small thing. And the second pillar is purpose. And I want to speak about purpose not as that big existential question that we might have. Maybe like the question, what was the question that? When was the last time you did something for the first time? Yes, that kind of existential question. So we often might think of purpose as something large, a calling, a life path, something we have to figure out. But what if purpose is simpler than that? Less about what you want than about what you give. That it gives you something to live for, some why that Joe often references that moves you forward. What if purpose actually happens when we turn toward needs and respond? And yet within the ordinariness, there is a deep sense of rightness, a feeling that says, this matters, this is worth my time, my presence. Purpose doesn't always arrive with clarity either. Sometimes it just grows through participation. We show up and meaning meets us there. I've certainly had that experience signing up for volunteer activity and realizing in the process, as I'm sure many of us have, is that I wasn't expecting much. I wasn't sure what I was going to give, but I seemed to have left with a lot more than I brought. So the third pillar is transcendence. And not in a religious way that I'm thinking about, but in stepping out beyond ourselves in a completely different way. These are those moments that are harder to name, but we often know them by how we feel. Moments when something opens up. It might be in the quiet after a conversation, in the stillness of this space, a feeling that somehow this small act of care that we've offered is connected to something larger. This is a picture of me, speaking of larger, yes. This is a picture of me in Muir Woods north of San Francisco. And it's a forest of sequoias. And as many of you know, these will live over 100 years and they'll grow more than 100 meters tall. And it truly is something when you walk through there that you feel how small we really are. And this tree has been there long before I arrived on the planet and will be here probably long after I'm gone. And that great reminder that we're simply here for a time and part of something. So, transcendence, those moments when we step beyond the boundaries of self. A sense of connection that expands us, that reminds us that life is bigger than any one of us. And volunteering often creates conditions for these moments, not because we're seeking them, but because when we give, we loosen the grip on me and open into we. And in that space, something shifts. So storytelling. These are the stories that we tell ourselves and tell others about ourselves. I'm mindful of couples when I meet them for the first time who are looking for an officiant to marry them. And one of the places that's relevant for me, certainly as a therapist and as an officiant, is that I'm always curious about stories, about couples' narratives. And there's a whole branch of therapy called narrative therapy, in fact, which reflects on our stories and how we can change them. But couples sometimes will say to me when I ask them what their story is, and they'll say, well, we don't really have one. And of course, that's nonsense. And because everybody has a story, at least one. Well, there's the public story, and then there's the private story. But we all have stories, and each one of us carries a story about who we are and why we're here. And those stories that I've mentioned aren't fixed. They're often unfolding, shaped by our community and the choices we make. When we give our time, our attention, our care, we begin to tell a different kind of story about ourselves. And think about West Hill and our collective story. A story that says who we are as a community, how we care for one another, how we have continued to care for each other through moments of sanctuary, through transition, to be who we are today, and yet knowing we will be something else tomorrow. But most importantly, we become part of each other's stories. And so West Hill is not just a place, it's a collection of these lived moments, of each of you and others along the way who have chosen again and again to be present to one another. And that becomes our shared narrative, a story we're all writing together. So returning to the heart of giving, when we speak of the heart of giving, perhaps we're not just talking about generosity, we're talking about meaning, about belonging that is created and received, about purpose that emerges through action, which some of us call volunteering, about stories that shape who we become, and moments that lift us, each of us, beyond ourselves. And maybe this is the quiet invitation before us, not to do more, not to give out of obligation, but just to notice where we're already giving. And that's why we're celebrating Volunteer Sunday. To notice how it connects us, to notice how it shapes our lives. Because the truth is, this community of West Hill is built on countless acts of care, seen and unseen, and each and every one matters. Thank you.
Become a sustaining champion of West Hill United's work by committing to an automatic monthly donation. Learn more or donate now through Canada Helps.